Welcome to the Suncoast In-Depth podcast. I'm Brett Watson, and today I have with me my good friend, Jonathon Cubley.
Thanks
for being here, man.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So we've started this series. This is the fifth one now, where we're talking about the experience of deconstructing your belief system, your faith, and then hopefully reconstructing, as I said in these videos over and over again. I hate to see people throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot.
Unfortunately.
You can see it all over social media, and so this has been a kind of a passion of mine, to talk to people about their specifically Christian faith. My education is in religion in general, but I've been in the Christian world for 30 plus years now, so I focus there, And so a lot of Christians have struggled with their beliefs, and many have struggled to the point of just throwing it all out.
Yeah.
And landing in the agnostic realm, or maybe even atheist realm. So you're somebody that I've gotten to know, and know that you have a unique deconstruction / reconstruction story. So why don't you just give us some background there?
Sure.
Help us understand you better.
I think the thing that makes us all unified is the fact that in order to be indoctrinated, you had to have someone indoctrinate you. Mm-hmm. And not in the sense of like anything negative, just meaning that's kind of just how you grew up and how you were taught. So at some point, we're called to question, and we're called to really make those profound questions. I just, growing up, was never, maybe I just didn't believe it, or I didn't understand that that's okay. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to just think on these things, to really understand and have deeper meaning with them. And I think that's where, for me anyway, being around it as much as I was, created almost an apathy. It was like, okay, like I know I'm saved. I know that this is how I'm supposed to live. I know right from wrong. So as long as I do that, I'm good.
So what was that environment like? What tradition were you in?
Well, so I grew up in a Baptist church. Not a huge church, probably about the size of Suncoast. So good size, but not small by any stretch. Not huge. Not one of those big Texas mega churches that we all know about. So grew up there, and then about 4th, 5th grade, when my parents divorced, we left the church. Dad was no longer allowed to be a deacon after the divorce. So then we just kind of floated. Then we moved to Florida. I found a really small church that was interesting. There was like 3 kids in the youth and probably 50 whole people in the congregation.
How old were you at that point?
Probably 16. So, I mean, I had been going to a few different Baptist churches through that time, a lot more fundamental, very much this is what the Bible says. This is how, again, like a lot of people who have sat where I sit, it's, here's the creed that we say. This is why you say it. It's, to save you from going to hell. They talk about very much the Dante's Inferno hell version, speech and version, and trying to really scare you from going to that place. So there's guilt and shame that's get brought into it. So again, I think all of those things kind of lead you to this place that at some point you're going to go, okay, like logic is going to take over, and some of this stuff just doesn't make sense.
So the thing I started writing this morning about the Bible, I started off by saying that, look, people deconstruct for a lot of reasons. Many, many people end up moving away from their faith communities because of relational reasons. And as was true in your case, you guys had to leave your church because your mom and dad got divorced. What was that like? Do you remember much about
unfortunately,
what led up to them leaving?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a really good long-term memory, so it's very detailed. So I can tell you a lot of the visual details. I can tell you the emotional details. It was, as far as us leaving, our world revolved around that place. So it was definitely where we were Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. We were there Wednesday, because that's where my school was, kind of like here, only they were affiliated. So it was the Christian school that we went to. Mm-hmm. So again, very We had Monday chapel. We had classes that all kind of revolved around it. So having to leave that environment was shattering. I mean, just my whole
No
world.
doubt. You guys were
imploded.
immersed.
Yeah. So my world imploded pretty much overnight. It's funny, we were talking about this last night when my daughter told me that she's been through struggles. And I was like, hey, your age, kid, like my dad had wrote me a letter saying that he was leaving. I had no idea why my dad was leaving. My parents were divorcing. I was changing schools. Like everything that I knew was like collapsing.
Yeah.
I had anxiety so bad I couldn't even walk to the elementary school that was a few blocks down the street from my house.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, just having to go through the divorce and all the things that led up to that with my parents, watching other families divorce and then my parents being like, no, we're never going to divorce. That's not going to happen to us. And then it happened.
Yeah.
So from a faith standpoint, I don't think any of the life circumstances that I went through as a kid really affected my faith. Like it's almost like it was so rooted that I never even thought to go, hey, this is something I should really question or think about. It was just, this is what it is, and this is what we believe and how you're going to believe. And it was just so ingrained in who I was that when it all shook loose, it was still there. We didn't go to the same place anymore. We didn't go to church. We didn't.
Yeah.
But, still doing nightly prayers, still going through all those things together.
How long was it before you guys landed in a church again?
So from the divorce, it was probably
And this is you and your mom then?
Well, so from 10, 11 until 13, I was with my mom and we went to a few different churches, and that was in the diatribe going to the Cathedral of Hope. So to quickly explain, Cathedral of Hope is a mega church, but it's predominantly gay, which is a whole interesting thing of itself. So, but they do, because they want to be inclusive to everybody, they'll do a very Catholic version where they have an actual person with the candles, and it's very ritual. So I had never been to a mass before, so that was my first experience going like,
Yeah,
what are they doing shaking the incense, and what is all this? Like,
that's so interesting. Was that in Texas?
Yeah. So I saw the people that would protest, and they would come out and tell me that my mom was going to hell, and so again,
Wow.
just different. And then through an outreach program, there was a Baptist church where my dad lived, and we were all there. And this guy just happened to knock at the door and was like, "Hey, do you want to come check out this church?" We prayed about it. My dad was like, "This is where I think we're all kind of being called to go." And from day one, we clicked. And so until we moved from Texas to Florida, that was our church
Church of Hope?
No, this was Lakeland Baptist Church. That was just my dad.
That's where
Sorry.
your dad went. Okay, I was under the impression
Yeah.
that your dad decided to go to church
No,
with you
no.
guys. Yeah.
No, the gay church was very quick. I mean, we probably only went to that church maybe a handful of times. It wasn't a big. It's a huge drive from where we lived, so that was a big thing. But I think my mom was just struggling to find a place to find her spirituality, and my mom was still a believer, even though her lifestyle was different than what she grew up with. So Baptist church kind of floated back to a Baptist church. Then we moved, kind of a Methodist. We went to a few different. We tried some Catholic. We tried a little bit of this, a little of that, and then I went to college. So. Again, like we would try home church. When I was in trouble, my dad would make me write Bible verses. So again, like Christianity, faith was always in our family and in our household. It just may not have been a place that we went every Sunday.
Yeah.
My dad definitely was the believer that, the head of the household is the priest, and you got to be the one teaching, I guess, in a sense, your spirituality. So my dad definitely made sure that those things were ingrained in my life, especially when it was bad.
Yeah.
So good for him.
Good for him, yeah.
Nothing
wrong with that.
I know a lot of the Proverbs. That was his thing. If I was bad, he would just make me write whatever the day was. I would write the whole proverb for that day.
That's funny. Okay, so then where would you say, because you do consider yourself deconstructed and reconstructing?
I'm definitely in the reconstructing phase. I think a huge part of that deconstructive phase came with you. And so we sat in your classroom. Yeah. Yeah. I was already in kind of that realm of pondering and thinking about, why is it that the beliefs that I have, and that it really just got me to go, okay, well, here's kind of the answer to the things I've been thinking. Why have I not thought of this stuff before?
Okay. So did college have any impact that way?
College did some, but again, college was one of those really weird times where freshman year, I had found somebody who was really heavily involved with a church, and then really got let down by, in the beginning, it just seemed very wholesome, very just, we're going to do kind of this Bible study. And then to find out later that they were running around the campus telling people that they were going to go to hell if they didn't believe what they believed, just was such a blundering of just, I don't want to be around this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not the kind of people I would like. You're turning people away, not bringing
Yeah.
people in.
Yeah.
But
But what you learned where did you go to school?
USF in Tampa.
Okay. So you went to a state school. So the science that you were taught, the history that you were taught in many respects, would have been at odds with
I mean,
a lot of the things you might have been taught from the pulpit.
yeah, I think the big one for me was going to a religions class, and the lady was her area of study was African tradition religions, which are some of the most ancient.
Mm-hmm.
So listening to some of her stories, listening to how some of the other religions have been around forever or longer than Christianity, obviously, it definitely puts a lot of doubt. But again, because of how I was raised, I just thought we were supposed to bury that. Like, doubt is not, there's no place for it. We're supposed to have faith, and the faith is supposed to overrule the doubt. So I just kind of would shuffle that stuff out of my mind. Like, logic and reason has no place here because it's my spiritual faith, and this is just what I believe. So I got into employment at a moving company. The person who I worked with most often was a philosophy major, and he and I would have lots of discussions about faith, and that's kind of where the seed of doubt really got implanted. And that's when he and I would just be like, well, is it because your parents believe it or because you believe it? And I would have to go home and really think about that. Like, why is it that I believe what I believe? And then another good friend of mine who has gone through his own religious journey, and it's interesting to see where he's come, but was atheist, and he's like, you got to watch this thing called Zeitgeist. And I'm like, what? And so it was basically taking all of your stories from the Bible and then showing you how they related to something that was a Christian, or how it was something to do with the sunrise, or like, it was really interesting how it flipped everything on its head. But I remember even leaving that going like, I'm still not convinced. Like, like again, I was just so rooted in it. It just, I just refused to be uprooted, and just, I kind of just stayed in bliss and ignorance until I met you. And then it was, okay, like I had all these doubts and I'd had all these experiences that I just was ignoring. And then you put it on a piece of paper, and I went, okay, like, now I can take all these pieces that I've seen and put them all together, and I can see the whole image. And now I get it. And so that's when I was able to go, okay, well, there's still a lot of truth and a lot of good, but let's take that, and then let's take all the things, and let's understand how to introduce logic and reason, and introduce the concepts of, like, the myth, like we talked about, and all of those things just really help resubmit my foundation of the love of it, and really just shifted a lot of my perspectives on things.
So it's interesting to me, like, obviously your parents divorced. I'm not going to harp on this.
No, that's okay.
But obviously, your parents divorced, at least in large part, to the fact that your mom
Yeah, no, it was. That's why.
got honest about her sexual orientation, right? Where's your mom, faith-wise?
Still believes. My mom is incredibly conservative, so a lot of her beliefs
That's
and
so
values
interesting.
never left. Yeah, that was the hard part, I think, about keeping my faith was the fact that you had two conflicting worlds, and
Yeah.
especially you're going back, we're not talking a year ago, this was 20 plus years ago. So the world was a very different place. We're a lot less accepting then. So for me, that was really hard to have people go, your mom's going to hell. And to go, well, why is she going to hell? Well, because she lives this life. And I'm like, but none of us are perfect. And if God died for my sins, why didn't he die for hers? Well, she stays in sin. I'm like, but again, that's not what you're teaching. You're teaching that he saved and that all the sin is gone.
Yeah.
So then how could she be? Yeah, that just doesn't make sense.
There's a lot of double standards.
Right.
It's interesting to me that in the New Testament where it's translated homosexuality, actually, that's not even a thing until the RSV.
Yeah, 1960.
55,
Was it?
54, something like 57. I don't know.
Troy said it, I think, in one of the sermons.
Actually did, yeah.
I wrote it down. It was in my notes. I'm like, I need to know this one.
Revised Standard Version was the first English translation, if I'm correct, that contained the word homosexuality as a translation of the Greek term. And so anyway, that became more of a cultural problem, at least it added to the cultural problem, right? And it gave unwarranted authority to the rejection of homosexuals, unfortunately. But it's not really a good translation. But people can look that up for themselves. But what I was getting at is it's interesting to me that your mom remains what you're calling a conservative. I hate labels, but that's interesting to me because I think I know what you mean by that.
Her values lean that direction. Very, so
like her views of scripture are.
So here's the funny thing: is after I've had some really good conversations with my parents since going through your course and doing a lot of research and stuff on my own as well, and now that I'm reconstructing, it's fun to have some conversations with them because some of the things they'll buy into and some they don't.
Okay.
It's interesting with my mom because when I would have the conversations with her about, like the original Bible studies or Bible stories of Adam and Eve, and she'll go, I didn't expect you to believe that those were like verbatim stories and historical figures. And she's like, why? What? Like, she's as confused as I am. And then my dad will be like, well, but that's how he grew up. So he still has a little bit of a harder time breaking from that. Whereas I think my mom's a little bit more open-minded to, or at least was already there. And I just didn't know because that's not what we were taught. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
Does she go to church?
Not that I know of. I mean, it's just not something that we talk about as far as like an actual place. I don't think they do. They also live in the middle, like in the boonies, so it's a little bit different. But
yeah, right. Yeah, that would be hard, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to you. So you began to reconstruct because of the class?
Yeah. So there was a lot going on with me personally at the time of the class, and I was dealing with a lot of guilt and shame of someone who had passed and I didn't save, and just a lot emotionally about that. And for whatever reason,
and by saved, you mean you didn't lead them to Christ before they died? Okay.
Yeah. My buddy who was the philosophy major died when he was 30. It was a freak accident, and
wow.
it was one of those things that it ate at me because we'd have lots of different conversations about God, and I was really having a hard time coming to grips with the fact that even though he was gone, he was in hell, again, according to how I used to think. And so right around the time of your class, I was cleaning something in my drawer, and I found his little card from for his memorial, and it was just eating at me. It's just like deep down, just eating at me. And it was about that time that I had decided to take the class and to sit with you and to go through the whole thing. So it was at that time, it was just already God going like, and again, I personally believe it was that God moment of going like, this is where you need to be, and you're going to feel at peace here. And went through the class, had another little God experience after it. And it was just one of those moments of the things that you've been holding on to and the things that you've really been
Burdened by?
burdened, but just, like sometimes when you have toys, you just leave them in a toy chest and they just collect dust. I had just been avoiding it.
Okay.
And it was something that needed to get dealt with and addressed, but it was just one of those, again, if it's not on the mind and it's not something that you're really feeling like you have to deal with, you just don't. So there were other things to deal with, and I just never put time to it. And it was that time that it needed to get dealt with, and it did.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, that's true with most people, isn't it? I mean, we grow up with a certain belief system, and then something happens in life that draws some of those beliefs into question.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what was happening with you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just something that just shakes the dust off.
Yeah.
And goes, oh, wow, I need to think about this stuff, All right, so you've probably heard Pastor Larry talk about his analogy of belief systems being this wall, this brick wall, right? Were there any certain bricks of belief, like Bible or baptism, or there's a million of them, but were there any certain bricks in that wall that were especially troublesome for you to let go of or pull out of the wall?
I haven't found one yet. Most of them have been pretty easy to kind of dust off, look at them, put logic, reason, put faith. If I got stuck on something, I've had a wealth of people around me that have been awesome to just be like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I love that it's not necessarily met with, well, I believe this. It's met with, well, some people believe this and some people believe this, and it's kind of a make your own decision about it. But
which we all have to do,
right? but it's nobody forcing it on you. It's nobody saying this is the opinion.
There's no coercion.
Yeah, no, and that's been the beauty of it, is being able to ask the questions and have the conversations so that I can make up my own mind and I can figure out what brick I'm going to value and what brick may need to just be placed aside or gotten destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Suncoast is a unique place that way. Yeah, for sure.
And that's why I love coming here.
Yeah, me too. I actually don't know where I could work in this field other than here. I just don't know.
Yeah.
It would be really tough to find another place. Although I will say there is a movement, and Suncoast happened to be kind of at the bleeding edge of that movement.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a few places that are popping up. I wouldn't say in the region here, but actually there is. Yeah, there is. There's a church that's been around for a long time in the area, and they just had a split, and the split was primarily, from what I could gather online, over being all-inclusive. It was actually around the homosexual issue, and the pastor that was leading that, they split off. And the inclusive crowd went one way and the exclusive crowd went the other.
Which is unfortunate because it still divided a community.
That is unfortunate.
And I actually have spent a lot of time thinking about this, but one of the things that in our recent sermon was about the inclusivity of the church and the point of being inclusive and accepting that we don't have to always have the same theological views to still understand that the love of God is what connects us all. And I think, again, that being the continual message here made deconstruction so easy, because it just, when you have the love and peace of God, you just know, I'm going to get through this. It's going to take some time, but I know it's all going to work itself out. And because, again, just you have that love and peace of God. And so it makes me sad to hear that churches split over it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that whole message was like, Dad, you can be Lutheran. It's okay. Like, you can be whatever you want to be, as long as you understand God loves you and I love you, and that's all that matters. And I think that's such a deep message. Like, if only we all could come together. There's so many things that we could accomplish if people would just realize, like, it's really not that hard.
Oh, you're getting on my soapbox.
I know. But it's funny because my mom and I have this conversation about how the school system, for example, the rule book could be like 2 rules, right? It could just be treat people right and do the right thing. Like it's, but unfortunately we have to put instructions on everything, including soap and everything else,
Right.
just how we have to do it. But,
So there are people that maybe you have in your life still that even just going to a church like Suncoast means that you're going to go to hell. So there are plenty of people out there that might happen upon this podcast and go, oh yeah, well, they go to Suncoast. They're going to hell. What makes you so okay with what they think is certainly true? And why can you look at what they're so certain of? You're going to go to hell. What is it that makes you so confident that no, that's not true?
I mean, I love the quote that a lion does not concern itself with the opinions of sheep. And I'm not calling those people sheep in the sense that people say, oh, you're sheeple. I just mean there's just certain things that I feel like once I have wrapped my head around to a certain point, unless it's somebody that I trust, I don't need a bunch of noise coming into my world. So it's very easy for me to just go, I don't know you, I don't trust you, so it's just noise. If you were to come to me and be like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm going to think about it because I know you and I trust you. But anybody else, it again, you're not in my circle. I don't really know, or it just.
So you don't have anything inside of you that like a little twinge of fear, maybe that. Well, what if they're right?
What if they are?
Then you'll burn in
am I?
hell forever.
Am I? How do they know?
Okay, that's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I mean. It's like I mean, and again, if you think about it, I've done what they told me to do. So how could I go to hell if I did what they told me to do?
Okay. So you got all the bases covered.
I got you covered. I did that. I was there with the power team when they were breaking things, going, come down here if you want to receive Jesus. I did that a couple times.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So it's like, I played your game. Now I would like to be with God's game. Like, it's just different.
So have you, I know you've read and been influenced by, like Rob Bell's stuff and have you read Roar's stuff?
No, I've done John Shelby Spock. I always get his last name.
Oh, Bishop Spong.
Spong, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Him, Bell, those have been the main 2 thus far.
Boy, you did it right there when you said Spong. I mean, there are going to be some people that are just like, oh, sure, Spong. Yeah. But anyway, so I think it's important for people, since we're on the topic of hell, which it always goes to that. I swear to God, you sit in a small group, and if there's anybody that comes in that's not always there, it's going to come up. Hell. And I just want people to understand that the version of hell that is proclaimed from so many pulpits is not a construct that comes from Scripture.
No.
It is you can see its history, how it developed, and why it developed, and you're not going to be able to verify those beliefs with the Bible.
The concept of hell just doesn't follow. It doesn't follow the teachings. It doesn't follow the God that we were taught to learn about.
No.
So my big conundrum and
well said.
What I poached to my dad was, if a bunch of people are on a deserted island and have no opportunity to learn about this Jesus that we know about, what happens to them?
Yeah.
And my dad was like, well, and I was like, no, there's no opportunity, no missionary, nobody ever makes it to this island. Where do they go if they die?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, but some people believe that there's like this innocence. Da, 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 da. I go, but that's not what we were taught. So that may be what you believe now, but that's not what we were taught. And what we were taught was that those people were going to hell. And that is incredibly unfair and unjust to a group of people who just had no chance.
Yeah.
So that's
and then
really
incredibly unfair and unjust to call God a God of justice.
right. And then it's like,
would allow for that, you know.
And if he's, I loved how Bryce brought up the whole all-powerful thing, but like that one was the easiest one for me to take down because I go, but those are human conditions put on a supreme being. So I mean, that's the easiest one.
Yeah.
Like those two about the whole all-knowing and those, I love those conversations, but it's like, how can I put something in my limited capacity on something so much bigger?
Yeah. Yeah. Fun to think about. Nothing we can prove.
No.
And so a lot of time can be entertaining spent on that, but not really all that necessary. So just the kind of contradictory notion that the God who created you and me would just create us foreknowing that, because I'm just going on the beliefs of where you came from, foreknowing that the vast majority of these created beings would spend an eternity in torment.
Yeah,
because I foreknow that they're not going to accept my son, or even have the opportunity to accept my son. But I'm going to make them anyway.
Yeah, that one got me. Yeah, and that's why knowing Fernando and all the things that he did to help me in life and to be there for me when I needed him most, and like when I had nowhere to turn, he was there.
This is your philosophy major friend, yeah.
To see him and then to have to think about for years, like I'm never going to see him again. He's being internally tormented, and there's nothing I can do about it. Like, and then you just go, but this guy that's up there loves me, loved him, and did nothing about it.
Yeah.
And I just went, there's got to be, and then so I come to Suncoast. There's the DocuGate, the whole bit about hell, and
so you were here when that happened?
Oh yeah. So we have been coming here a really long time in our world, meaning because it's basically the entire time we've had an opportunity to come, we've tried to. We moved, and then we were like, we should try to find a church closer to us because it'll be easier, and we just tried and failed.
Yeah.
So make the hike. It's been awesome. It's been really eye-opening to think about if God is constantly love, all the things that you remember growing up going, that all now has to be shaken and dealt with, because the stories and stuff when you're going, okay, well, if God loves me, that eternal torment or that dark place that they say that you're going to go and all the stuff that is happening to my friend just can't be. No. And that's where you had that beautiful analogy where you were, and I don't want to put words in your mouth and say it was you, but the words in the class.
I won't remember anyway, but
how you explained it was that heaven was a place of just so much perfection and good that it would almost be uncomfortable. And I started to really think about that, and I'm like, yeah, if you had a world that just had no, again, we know this world as a lot of duality of
contrast.
Yeah, like we know it's really hot outside because we know what cold is.
Yes,
and there's that contrast. So it really started creating a lot of things in my brain of, if it's so good and there's none of the bad, you're now all to one polarity.
Mm-hmm.
So that can't feel normal. That can't feel like, it's got to be a little agitating just because it's so good. And I think some people are going to have a hard time with that. So you were saying that there's kind of a place that, let's not call it purgatory, but maybe it's just a waiting room, if you will, until you kind of can get to a point of comfort to then go in.
This is along the lines of belief that held by, what we call the church fathers.
Like the early scholars, I think.
Yeah, yeah. They their version of hell wasn't a place of eternal torment. You don't really see much of that until, not that it didn't exist, but you don't see too much development there until 5th century. But instead, they felt like, well, look, is there a process that we're going through? Yes. Is that process completely finished when we leave here? No. Can it be? Possibly. That means that there is a state of being where that we are being purged, at our own pace, but not tormented, not tortured for retributive reasons. But they thought of it as, and this is consistent with the Greek New Testament, a place of restorative justice. Not a place so much, but a state of being. Call it what you want, but it's a state of restorative justice, corrective, bringing you to wholeness.
So somebody was putting a really good analogy on, like, if you were to create, I don't quite remember the whole point of it, but I think it makes really good sense here, is if you were to create the perfect human, like in your own mind, and you were to say, I want this person to have patience, how would you teach somebody to have patience?
Right.
You'd have them wait for things. Like, it would be a process.
Yes.
If you wanted to teach somebody to be brave, you're not just going to put them in easy situations. You're going to put them in situations where they have to act and be brave. Yeah. So I think that, to me, is when they say eternal torment, I don't know if it's torment, but if there's things that we need to learn, because, again, if you're in a place that has all of the good and you didn't learn that, that's where it's going to be awkward. So we were making the joke about how some people will just never go through those doors. It's always open for you to go in, but like some people are just never going to feel right being there.
Yeah.
It's like
C.S. Lewis kind of pondered that. Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I think that's much more realistic in my mind. It's much more logical to a person who loves you to be like, yeah, you didn't quite get that here, so why don't you ponder on that here?
Yeah, and that may not be easy. Just like this life isn't easy, right? No. I mean, there are contrasts for a reason. So here's another scenario. If heaven, as we're calling it, is this perfected reality that we're moving towards, you can imagine that you would have no idea if you were just created within that sphere of perfection. You have no idea what perfection is. You have no idea what goodness is. You have no idea what kindness is because it's all you've ever known. It's your only point of reference, right? So the beauty of this, what we call a fallen experience, fallen world, is that you do have contrast, so that when you do reach the place of perfection, holy crap, now I know what perfection is. This is boss, right?
It's so much greater than we're at, than you could ever even put into.
It explains why things like, there's all those weird places in the scripture where, like Paul says, don't you know? Why are you suing each other? Don't you know that one day you'll judge angels? Wait, what?
What?
Yeah. Well, if an angel only exists in a certain point of reference and we as humans exist in another, there are things that we know that angels can't know. Because some things you only know by experience. Right?
Well, that's why they say the most important bit of information is the first time you do something, right?
That's it, yeah.
Because you can never duplicate it again after that.
Right.
So the first time you experience something, that's, take web development, for example. Like, you put somebody through a website the first time, it's their only time being first time.
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to watch what they do. Mm-hmm. That's the only time to get that experience.
Yeah.
I see our time on Earth as a time to grow, a time to learn, and I think for a large portion of my life, I didn't understand that. And then coming here and witnessing the people around me, people like you, people like Larry, who really poured into everybody to say, our purpose in life is not to try to save everyone. Our purpose in life is not to go door to door and try to tell people that you're going to hell and to try to make you a believer. It's about loving people and that connection point between each other.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it all comes back to that inclusivity thing that I think is just so incredibly important.
So let's close. I usually close with this. Like we said earlier, there's a lot of people that are going through this process that we're calling deconstruction. And I liken it to, this poor person sitting in a heap of ash and, ruins of their wall all around them. Maybe they feel dirty. Maybe they feel disconnected. Maybe they feel angry. Since so many people are going through this right now, it's a growing demographic. If you knew somebody sitting in that position or some variation of it, what's one thing that you would want to convey to them to help them to reconstruct something that is sustainable and still hope-filled,
One of the biggest things, I think, as far as the foundation of the reconstructing of my faith, if you know much about construction, when you do a concrete wall, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do hollow cell where, you drill a few, it's probably about 2 inches into the concrete that it's just hollow. Then you have poured concrete where they basically taken the same hollow cells, but they're going to fill it with concrete. So we talk about the brick wall. And if you were to build a brick wall, with your individual bricks, your poured concrete wall, which is your structure of your home, is love. It's not one brick. It's a whole wall. Love to me being an action, a connectivity between us as humans and with God. I use this analogy with my kids. It's like a ball of yarn is God. And then there's a connection point to all of us. And then between all of us, there is a connection point. And that is how we give, sin, receive, love. That to me is one of the best messages that I think Suncoast really offers to its community, is about God's love and the power of it, because there's so many times I see, whether it's another human just seeing the need and just hearing the call and stepping up when it's needed and being like, what do you need? Like, let me pour into you. We've got people within our own community that have needed help, and you just watch all these people just pour in. And it's a connection between humans. And it's that human connectivity, but I feel like when we all gather and unify, you see this godlike moment where God's with them, these people are unified for love, and not to tear anybody down, but just to build each other up. And you just see such a positive, hopeful group of people. Anytime you see a bunch of Suncoasters get together, I've never seen anybody laugh so much, laugh and cry in a positive way. It's even in the worst of times, it's still a lot of positivity and love and hope. And that, I think, as the foundation of what you're building, the most important piece is really just about love and what love can do to people around you and to yourself.
Yeah, man.
Loving yourself.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. There is, so really what you're getting at is, don't try to rebuild something with bricks that have nothing to do with relationship.
Yeah.
Right? If I sign off on a belief statement about the Trinity, what does that mean for my transformation? What does that mean for your transformation? What does it have to do with my relationship with you or with God, for that matter? It's just this kind of ambiguous, I believe in the Trinity, but so what?
Yeah.
Like, what does that do, right?
Right.
But if your foundation is relational, like you're describing, then there's somewhere to grow and go, right?
I mean, I think the part about love is not only is it a connection point between people, but it also gives you something to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think
actionable.
It's actionable. So, like when I sat down with my kids and I needed 2 rules for my house, we have 2 rules. That's it. I don't make it complicated. And it's just, I should only have to tell you once. It's actionable. It's tangible. I can count it. It's easy. And the other one is just be kind to everybody always. So
Which is an extension of love, right?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
you know. And again, that's kind of the foundation of it is because, you know, I can't explain to them like love everybody because, I mean,
Yes.
love happens in so many different ways.
Yes.
But I can say be kind. And then if you're not being kind, it's pretty easy to go, are you being kind?
Yeah.
No. So let's adjust that.
Yeah.
You know, so again, I think it all just pairs with there's a love that happens between you and God. There's a shared experience that happens there, and then there's this shared experience with other people. And then I think one of the big things about finding a way to love those around you is like somebody said, who was it? Was it Troy that said, "Find the God in others"? May have been Larry, may have been you. I don't know.
They pray that.
Yeah.
I will endeavor to serve Christ in others.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like, because there's that connection point, even people who I don't like, God's in them. So it's like you got to find the God in them and find, because again, we all have these exteriors. We all have these experiences that we carry around with us that make us who we are.
Yeah.
But even in the...
But it doesn't change that
it's there. It's always
Christ
there.
is present in that person.
At all times.
Yeah.
And again, just some people, it's harder to wake up than others. So it's just, you kind of got to search for it a little bit. And that's to the point of when they least expect it and they least deserve it. That's where that hits even harder, because I really do have to focus on that.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. Thanks. Appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, man.